It is 11:24 a.m. in the bright, high skies above the Aegean Sea. Two F-16 fighter jets are scrambling to intercept a civilian airliner. The target is Helios Airways Flight 522. To the radar controllers on the ground, the plane appears to be flying normally. Its altitude is steady at 34,000 feet. Its autopilot is holding a perfect course, but the radio has been silent for over 2 hours. The lead fighter pilot closes the distance, pulling his jet alongside the Boeing 737 to visually inspect the cockpit. He is looking for terrorists. He is looking for a struggle. Instead, he sees a mystery. The captain's seat is empty. The first officer is slumped forward over the controls, motionless. Through the cabin windows, oxygen masks can be seen dangling from the ceiling, swaying gently in the conditioned air. 121 passengers are sitting in their seats. They are not moving. Unbeknownst to the military command, the aircraft has become a flying tomb. It is a ghost ship circling the Greek islands on automation, simply waiting for the fuel to run dry. This is the story of the Helios silence. To the human body, the environment at 34,000 feet is as hostile as the bottom of the ocean. The air is too thin to sustain consciousness. The temperature is 50 degrees below zero. To survive, the Boeing 737 is designed to act as a pressurized vessel. It traps thick, breathable air inside the cabin, shielding the occupants from the vacuum outside. It is a life support system hurtling through the stratosphere at 500 miles per hour, but this shield relies on a delicate balance. If the pressure fails, the result is hypoxia. Unlike suffocation, hypoxia is insidious. It is known as the silent killer because it does not signal itself with gasping or panic. It begins with confusion, then a strange sense of well-being. The brain is starved of oxygen, but it tells the victim that everything is fine. Judgment fades, vision narrows, and finally the lights simply go out. The chain of events leading to this silence begins not in the air, but on the tarmac in Cyprus. Earlier that morning, a ground engineer performs a routine leak check on the aircraft's rear door. To test the seal, he enters the cockpit and adjusts the overhead pressurization panel. He reaches up and turns the mode selector from auto to manual. When the test is complete, the aircraft is signed off. The maintenance log is closed, but in the routine distraction of the morning shift, a critical detail is overlooked. A single toggle switch, no larger than a human finger, is left in the wrong position. At 9:07 a.m., Flight 522 pushes back from the gate at Larnaca International Airport. In the cockpit are Captain Hans-Jürgen Merten and First Officer Pampos Karalambous. Between them, they have decades of flying experience. They run through the pre-flight checklists. They scan the instruments. Their eyes pass over the overhead panel, but the small switch set to manual goes unnoticed. It is a detail hiding in plain sight. The aircraft climbs into the blue morning sky. As the Boeing 737 ascends, the laws of physics dictate that the cabin must pressurize. The valves should close to trap the air, but because the system is in manual mode, the valves remain partially open. The air inside the cabin is escaping as fast as the plane climbs. At an altitude of 12,000 feet, the warning system triggers. A loud, intermittent horn begins to blare in the cockpit. It is a piercing, rhythmic sound designed to demand attention. But tragically, it creates confusion. On this specific model of aircraft, the same horn sound is used for two completely different warnings. On the ground, it means the plane is not configured for takeoff. In the air, it means the cabin is losing pressure. The pilots, believing the computer is malfunctioning, assume they are hearing a false takeoff configuration warning. They begin to troubleshoot a system that isn't broken, ignoring the one that is killing them. They contact the engineering center on the ground. The captain's voice is frustrated. He asks about cooling fans. He asks about circuit breakers. He does not realize that his judgment is already beginning to fracture. The oxygen in his blood is dropping. The mental fog of hypoxia is setting in. He stands up to check a panel behind his seat, and the connection with reality is severed. By 9:20 a.m., the aircraft levels off at its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet. The autopilot engages, capturing the programmed route to Athens. The engines settle into a steady, efficient hum. The computer is doing exactly what it was told to do. It flies the heading, it maintains the speed, but inside the fuselage, the human element has been removed. In the passenger cabin, the emergency oxygen masks have automatically deployed. Orange rubber cups dangle in rows above the seats, but the chemical oxygen generators only provide air for 12 minutes. It is a system designed for a rapid emergency descent, not a sustained cruise. The 12 minutes pass. The passengers drift from confusion into unconsciousness. There is no panic. There is no struggle. The hypoxia wraps them in a deep, unbreakable sleep. The heart rate's slow. The breathing becomes shallow. In the cockpit, the first officer has stopped responding to radio calls. The captain has collapsed on the floor. The loud warning horn continues to blare, echoing off the instrument panels, but there is no one left to hear it. Flight 522 is now a ghost flight. Air traffic control in Nicosia calls out to the aircraft. No answer. They hand over the flight to Athens control. Athens calls out. Silence. The plane enters Greek airspace without authorization. It is a rogue object on the radar screens, a metallic anomaly moving with perfect precision but absolute silence. For nearly 3 hours, it circles in a holding pattern over the Kiev VOR station, round and round, a Flying Dutchman of the jet age, suspended in the freezing stillness of the upper atmosphere. The silence forces the hand of the Greek military. Fearing a hijacking, 2 F-16 fighter jets are dispatched to investigate the unresponsive intruder. At supersonic speeds, they cut through the sky to intercept the airliner. As they pull alongside the 737, the fighter pilots are prepared for combat. They expect to see terrorists. They expect to see a threat. Instead, they witness a surreal tragedy. The lead pilot reports his observations to the ground. He describes the dangling masks. He describes the motionless passengers. He confirms the first officer is slumped over his yoke. But then, he sees movement. In the cockpit of the ghost plane, a figure enters. It is not the captain. It is Andreas Prodromo, a flight attendant who holds a private pilot's license. By some miracle of physiology, or perhaps by using portable oxygen bottles, he has remained conscious while everyone around him has faded away. He is the last man awake on a ship of the sleeping. He steps over the collapsed captain. He sits in the pilot's seat. He puts on a headset. The F-16 pilot watches as Prodromo struggles with the controls. He waves to the fighter jet. A small, desperate gesture from behind the thick glass. The fighter pilot signals back, but there is nothing he can do. Prodromo is not a trained Boeing pilot. He is trying to save the plane, but the physics of the situation have already determined the outcome. The engines have been burning fuel for hours in the holding pattern. The tanks are running dry. At 11:49 a.m., the left engine sputters. The fuel supply is exhausted. The turbine slows, the whine drops in pitch, and the generator kicks offline. The imbalance of thrust causes the aircraft to bank sharply. The autopilot, fighting to keep the plane level with only one engine, disengages. Flight 522 begins its final descent. 10 minutes later, the right engine flames out. The silence that filled the cabin now extends to the outside world. The roar of the jets is replaced by the rushing wind. The aircraft becomes a heavy glider, drifting down from the heavens towards the hills of Grammatico. Andreas Prodromo, alone in the cockpit, fights until the very end. The flight data recorder will later show inputs on the yoke, a final futile attempt to steer the massive vessel away from Athens, but gravity reclaims the vessel. At 12:03 p.m., the Helios Boeing 737 impacts the rugged terrain. There is no fire initially, just the brutal physics of momentum meeting Earth. The structure disintegrates. In an instant, the 3-hour journey of silence is over. The investigation that follows sifts through the wreckage to find the truth. They find the pressurization mode, selector panel. It is burnt and damaged, but the toggle switch is clearly identifiable. It is still set to manual. The tragedy of Flight 522 is not just in the loss of life, but in the simplicity of the error. It was not a mechanical failure. It was not bad weather. It was a chain of misunderstandings that began with a single switch. If the pilots had recognized the meaning of the warning horn, they could have simply donned their oxygen masks and descended. They could have flipped the switch back to auto. They could have landed safely, but the confusion of the human mind under hypoxia robbed them of that chance. The accident forced a change in aviation protocols. The checklist procedures were rewritten. The warning systems on the Boeing 737 were redesigned to prevent confusion between takeoff configuration and cabin altitude. The silence of the Helios crew spoke loudly enough to save future lives. Today, a small chapel stands on the hill at Grammatico. It overlooks the valley where the metal fell from the sky. For 3 hours, Flight 522 was a tomb drifting above the clouds. It serves as a haunting reminder that in the thin air of the upper atmosphere, consciousness is a luxury. We rely on machines to keep the universe at bay. And sometimes, all it takes is a moment of silence to remind us how fragile that protection truly is.